What's going on, guys? It's Adam P. Welcome back to more Newcastle transfer news. We are out here in Singapore, currently midnight. Of course, back in the UK, it's afternoon time, and plenty of news is coming out about our football club. Now, I'm keeping the tour stuff away from the transfer stuff. So on my channel, give you an example earlier, we interviewed John Beresford at Newcastle's first fan-led event out here in Singapore. Ended up going to an Arsenal bar, and you can imagine it go a bit mental. So make sure you go and check out that video if you haven't done so already. To our content, separate from the transfer news, because why we are positive over here and why the club is looking to push out their brand to an Asian fan base, we can't deny the negativity and mess behind the scenes regarding Alexander Isak. Now, Newcastle Aid has remained firm and said that his transfer value is £150 million. If Isak was to leave this window for £150 million, that would be the third most expensive transfer in history, while being the most expensive player to ever leave the Premier League or to stay in the Premier League if he was to move to a team like Liverpool. Newcastle remain firm on it, but it looks like he will leave this summer, with Wissa and Sesko being the two targets Newcastle wants to bring in. We'll start off with Johan Wissa, because this one, Newcastle seem to have landed. Now, Craig Corb has said that it's going to be a bit delayed with issues perhaps on the Brentford end of things, but it looks like Wissa's a real priority for Newcastle. And Keith Downey's even described it in his YouTube video yesterday as Wissa prioritising the Newcastle team, which means if we sign Johan Wissa, he's turned down Tottenham coming to us now. That is a big deal because, well, Thomas Frank, of course, the former Brentford manager, is now the Tottenham manager. Also, Wissa wouldn't need to leave his home if he went to Tottenham. So the fact that he's went out of his way to leave home, go up to Newcastle and to put it under a different manager, I think it is a big deal for Newcastle. And of course, it will be heavily overshadowed by the Isak stuff, and rightfully so. But for Wissa coming in, potentially around £35 million, yes, the valuations are a lot of money for someone with 12 months left in his contract, but he is good. 19 goals last season in the Premier League. And if you were able to get Wissa and Sesko, while both players aren't as good as Isak, I think the pairing of Wissa and Sesko is a better pairing than Isak and Wilson. Of course, Wilson last season more or less passed it without trying to be nasty with him, and Isak, while, as I mentioned before, being a better player than them. Wissa and Sesko would be a good duo. I would be happy with that. Now, Sesko, of course, is the harder deal out of the two to pull off. And when you look at the situation with Benjamin Sesko, it would cost a lot of money to bring him in. You're talking around the 60 to 70 million pound mark. It's a player that Leipzig is prepared to let go of. Sesko is keen on the move and certainly interested in making that potential transfer to Newcastle. We mentioned a couple of weeks ago, all the other teams in the Premier League have already bought players up. Liverpool's got Isak and they want Isak. Whereas Chelsea spent so much money already. Arsenal's got Gyökeres, City don't need a new striker. Tottenham have invested. And when you look at all the teams around us, Newcastle is probably the best team in the Premier League I could get Sesko. I don't think anyone else in the Premier League would go out of their way to get him. So we certainly have a free hit to try and get him. And for a player, when you look at his stats, a lot of potential. And I would like him at Newcastle. I certainly feel like if he said goals and you get these two. And I think Newcastle has done as well as they could have from the situation of losing one of your key main hitters. And we'll mention again in terms of the Isak stuff, I haven't liked in his point of view. Of course, there's plenty of other places you can point the finger to as well, but the timing of it's awful. Could have been done at the start of the window. Isak's, I think, especially since the Liverpool interest came a couple of weeks ago, it's been a head turner for him. I haven't liked it at all. And while I'm not going to put all the blame on Isak, because not all the blame should go on him, just haven't liked in his point of view. Now, the Newcastle United players have spoken out about the situation. Of course, they've just arrived in Singapore this morning. So it was a chance for them to get interviews from several media outlets. And Newcastle continue to have a controlled narrative. They continue to say that Isak's injured, he's going to be fit when they get back. And I feel like, especially in our point of view, we're trying to protect the player. We're also trying to maintain this narrative in social media that Isak is going nowhere. And to be fair to the club, he is a contracted player. He still is a Newcastle United player, regardless of what me and you say. He is still a player at this football club. In order for Newcastle to be able to sell him, they want to get as much money for him as possible. So if we just go out of our way now and say, oh, he's for sale or he's going to leave, then clubs are going to offer less money. So Newcastle needs to be strong. And no matter what happens walking out this transfer window, we have to look good with this Alexander Isak situation. If it's a case where Liverpool signs Ekitike and Isak, in the space of 2 weeks, he went from the potential 4-4-2 at our club to 4-4-0. And you can imagine social media are going to rip the absolute mick out of us. I think the transfer fee is the big one. If you can get the £150 million, record-breaking transfer fee that Newcastle wants, then you look good. No matter what happens in the situation, you're able to get that kind of money in for him. Newcastle will look well. And in terms of what teams can afford him, that's the real question. In the back end of the transfer window now, I just don't think Liverpool put that kind of money down. So Newcastle need to be strong. They need to stay firm on it. And we need to make sure we look good come out of the situation no matter what happens. Of course, for the players, speaking about it though, I love Bruno. I absolutely love Bruno. He's actually came out and said that, well, for me, if one day I'm not good enough for Newcastle anymore, I'm going to go back to Brazil. I love the ambition here and I love the project here. And these are the sort of players that are just going to stick by you through thick and thin. He's a sort of player that is going to go down as a club legend. I speak about the potential possibility of Isak being a club legend and why you guys may debate between that. We can all agree Bruno is definitely a legend. Him coming out and staying strong in this situation, while of course he's followed through with the club now, as he would have been taught to do so from the media team. He's been strong in it. He said that, well, I'm going to stay here. I love this football club and I'm going nowhere. And I love that message from him. Class from him. Of course, Joe Linton yesterday with a bit of a nod towards his second home, was a bit of a dig towards the guy. I don't think that picture being there is a coincidence. We look at his Instagram story. I think that is a dig towards Isak. Dan Byrne again went through the club narrative today on social media and just said that Isak's injured. We don't want to go anywhere and we want to go back to when he is fit. I don't believe in this injury rubbish, to be honest. I think Isak 100% should have been out here in Asia. I think he could have easily been out here in Asia. And while you can argue that his injury might have been a problem on the plane, come on, the flying first class, the guy would have had his own bed if he wanted to. I definitely think behind the scenes, we're probably just trying to make sure he is fit enough to be so, or making sure that, of course, in our point of view, we can do our best to get him out and get a lot of money for him. But ultimately, as much as I love to be out here in Singapore and I love to be out in South Korea, heavily overshadowed by this transfer noise behind the scenes, and it's just not going to stop anytime soon. Wissa looks like he's going to come in. Sesko, if you can get him, then Newcastle should let Isak go. Ideally, not a Liverpool. And I'm not just saying that because I've got this stupid bet about where the Liverpool top if he does go there. I do regret saying that now, to be honest. But ultimately, if you give them to Liverpool, we are going to look weak unless the transfer fee is through the roof. And if we can manage to do that, then fair enough. But if it's 100 million, 110 million, it's far less than what Newcastle wanted. And Liverpool managed to get Ekitike and Isak offers. It just will not make us look good in the transfer market. And that's nothing personal towards Liverpool. But in our best interest, it has to be a different club, I feel like, outside the Premier League. If possible, if we can get them out there, that's in our best interest. And that's how I think Newcastle will walk away from the situation in the best possible state. But in terms of this video, in terms of talking about the transfers, not an awful lot to get through. James Trafford, of course, went to Manchester City as expected. And Manchester City even activated the buyback clause with less than 60 minutes to go. City almost waiting for Newcastle to make that approach. Never came from Newcastle, and City just did double check. Went in there, less than 1 hour left of that buyback clause. We didn't stand a chance with that one. City have completely played us in that respect, and they've got a good goalkeeper in. But again, Newcastle's got a goalkeeper situation for now. It's all right, but again, we've just got to get the centre half in, got to get the strikers in, got to sort our areas out. And that's why I'm so frustrated with the Isak stuff, because it's properly done Eddie Howe in behind the scenes. I feel so bad for Eddie Howe. He's worked his arse off, he's worked his backside off doing everything behind the scenes, and our factors are going against him. Ownership's going against him. Players going against him. He's got a lot of work to do behind the scenes. You just can't blame Eddie Howe, because I think the guy's done just about everything he could. But again, it's just our factors going against him. So it is what it is. We're going to move on now. We're going to crack on with it and we're going to sort everything out. Isak out. It's probably going to drag on for a while. I'm not expecting this saga to end anytime soon. I reckon this could drag out for a good couple of weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle is waiting to bring strikers in first before that potential possibility even happens. I don't see him staying after this summer. I feel like, especially for a player that's declared that he wants to move elsewhere and wants to go to Liverpool, if you keep hold of a player for 12 more months after that, I just don't think it's in our best interest to do that. I think it has to now be this summer, as much as I'm annoyed and peeved off about it. We move on. There are more players out there. Isak is not bigger than Newcastle today. We can move on. Players go, players come in. We sort it out and we move on. Eddie Howe would do it. Players behind the scenes would do it, because we've got a real good core together. We just need to invest in those areas. And so far this window, it's been a mess. We just haven't been able to do it. So hopefully we can now finally get some transfers together. We can finally sort the situation out, because it's just been a horrible couple of weeks for us.